Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. Subscribe for more interesting videos. Thank you. Here is the story begins. The Badlands had never known silence. Even in the dead of night, the jagged rocks groaned with the shifting of heat. The wind whistled through canyons like a mournful chorus, and hidden beasts stirred beneath the sands. To Deck, the sound were a reminder of exile. Each whispering gust carried the weight of his dishonor. Each vibration from the earth a reminder that he no longer walked among his clan. He had once stood shoulder to shoulder with hunters of great renown, but arrogance and impatience had stripped him of his place. Now he lurked in the shadows, surviving as a ghost, a predator without a pack, in a land where even shadows had teeth. When the strange human craft burned through the atmosphere and split the clouds with fire, Deck's scarred mandibles clicked in unease. The sky had witnessed many arrivals, but this one carried purpose. He tracked the descent from the cliffs, his yellow eyes narrowing as he marked the crude but sturdy landing site that unfolded like a fortress of steel and grit. Humans emerged in disciplined lines, their voices harsh and clipped, their movements practiced. They were not scavengers or wandering settlers. They were soldiers, explorers of war. Deck crouched, claws scraping stone, and considered. To strike now would bring swift glory. Yet instinct whispered that these were no ordinary prey. At their head marched a tall figure, broad-shouldered and steady, his gaze as sharp as any blade. Captain Marcus Hale. The human moved with the calm of one who had seen many battles and lived through them all, though his eyes bore the fatigue of someone who had sacrificed more than victory ever returned. Hale commanded not with shouts but with presence. His men adjusted to his pace without question. They were bound by loyalty, not fear. To Deck, this was strange. In his clan, loyalty was demanded through dominance, enforced by strength. Here it seemed earned. Deck shadowed them through the canyons, his body concealed against stone, his movement so fluid the men below never looked up. He listened to their clipped exchanges, reports about terrain, signals about forming perimeters, the tension in their voices as they acknowledged the rumors of this land. They had come seeking ancient weapons, remnants buried in the Badlands, artifacts of war older than either species' memory. That was the prize, the lure that drew both human and predator alike into this cursed place. For Deck, recovering such a relic might erase his shame, might restore him honor. Yet now humans stood in his way. His patience frayed. He stalked closer, unseen, his shoulder cannon humming softly with restrained power. He fixed his gaze on Hale. One shot would silence the leader and scatter the rest. He aimed, and then he paused. The man moved differently. Hale stopped often to study the cliffs, his eyes tracing paths where ambush might come, his instinct sharp as though he had hunted this land before. The soldiers were quick to adjust, anticipating threats as though guided by an invisible hand. Deck's claws flexed. Prey was not supposed to see the trap before it was sprung. The moment came when one of Hale's scouts wandered too close to a fissure in the earth, a narrow fault where sand shifted like quicksilver. Deck had laid snares there, cruel talons hidden in the soil. The man stepped, and then Hale barked a command. The soldier froze, looking down to find the sand shifting unnaturally beneath his boot. With calm precision, Hale guided him back. Deck felt the sting of frustration. His trap undone, his chance spoiled. The human had sensed it, almost as if he smelled the danger as a true hunter would. Night cloaked the Badlands in a canopy of stars, and the humans lit no fires. They moved with caution, their camp forming a circle of defenses, their weapons aligned to cover every shadow. Deck watched them from above, poised like a phantom. His honor demanded blood. He leapt. The strike was swift. His cloak shimmered away as he dropped among them, plasma burning, blades flashing. Soldiers scrambled, their shouts piercing the night. But Hale was already moving, already drawing his weapon, and firing with a calm born of countless firefights. The men did not scatter. They closed ranks. Bullets sparked against Deck's armor, forcing him to twist and strike back. One soldier fell, another staggered, but the rest pressed forward, driving him toward the edge of the encampment. And then it happened. Hale faced him, unflinching. Deck lunged, claws ready to spill blood, but Hale sidestepped at the last instant, his weapon pressed against Deck's temple. A single shot, and the hunt would end. Deck froze, muscles tense for the inevitable. Yet no bullet came. Hale's voice was low, steady, carrying not triumph but a strange recognition. "You're not here for them," he said, tilting his head toward his men. "You're here for something else." The soldiers encircled, guns trained, breath sharp. Deck could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He had been caught, not by strength but by foresight, by patience, by something he did not expect from humans. Hale did not pull the trigger. Slowly, deliberately, he lowered his weapon. The signal was clear, mercy or perhaps acknowledgement. Deck's mandibles clicked with confusion. In his world, mercy was weakness, and weakness meant death. Yet the human had chosen differently. Deck leapt back, disengaging, his cloak shimmering once more. The soldiers remained tense, waiting for Hale's order. None came. From the ridge, Deck looked down at them, his claws tight against his palms. Shame burned at being bested, yet deeper still stirred a reluctant respect. The human captain had marked him not as prey, but as something else, an opponent, perhaps even a rival. The night wind howled across the canyons, carrying the promise of greater hunts yet to come. Deck knew this was no ordinary quarry, no simple mission of redemption. He had crossed into a contest of wills, a battle of cunning and endurance, where honor would be tested in ways neither predator nor human had yet imagined. And though he withdrew into shadow, his mind was already sharpened with anticipation. The Badlands had never known silence. Now they would know war. The Badlands stretched for miles under the merciless sun, a furnace of stone and shifting dunes that seemed determined to strip flesh from bone. Captain Marcus Hale led his men through the labyrinth of canyons, their boots grinding against gravel, weapons raised in constant vigilance. They had survived the night's ambush, barely, and though they carried themselves with the rigid confidence of soldiers, each man felt the weight of the encounter. Hale had spared a monster when he could have killed it. Some of his men viewed that decision as tactical restraint. Others whispered it was a mistake. Hale heard their murmurs, but said nothing. His silence was deliberate, as precise as any command. Among the squad, Sergeant Daniel Cross remained closest to Hale. Cross was younger, sharp-eyed, with the stubborn energy of a soldier who believed battles could still be won cleanly. Where Hale's scars whispered of compromises and losses, Cross carried the hunger of someone still trying to carve meaning out of war. As they moved deeper into the canyons, Cross broke formation just enough to fall into step with his captain. "You could have ended it last night," he said quietly, his voice low so the others wouldn't catch. "Why let him walk?" Hale kept his eyes forward, studying the path carved through the rock. His reply was measured, because it wasn't the right kill. "Not yet." Cross frowned, unsatisfied. "That thing won't give us the same mercy." "Mercy wasn't the point," Hale muttered, and that was the end of it. The men respected Hale enough not to press further, but unease lingered. They had trained to face human enemies, insurgents, or mercenaries in lawless territories. Not the kind of predator that moved like a ghost, wearing invisibility as naturally as skin. The creature had tested their defenses, and Hale's decision not to finish it gnawed at them. Yet they trusted his instincts, for his instincts had kept him alive in worse places than this. As the sun reached its zenith, the squad came upon ruins buried beneath dunes, jagged monoliths jutting from the earth like broken teeth. The air was heavy with heat, but beneath it, Hale sensed something else, an almost metallic resonance that vibrated in his bones. These were no natural formations. This was a place. Form perimeter. Hale ordered. His men moved without hesitation, spreading out, weapons raised, eyes scanning every shadow. Cross crouched near a half-buried slab, brushing away sand to reveal carvings. Intricate, angular, far older than human history. "Captain," Cross called, voice tinged with awe. "It's real. All of it. The stories, the fragments we pulled from orbit. It's all here." Hale studied the glyphs, his expression unreadable. They spoke of wars fought before humanity crawled from the mud, of weapons forged not for survival, but for dominance. And somewhere in these ruins lay the relics his superiors demanded he find. But Hale was not a fool. Weapons left behind in places like this were never abandoned without reason. A shadow shifted along the ridge. Hale's hand instinctively reached for his rifle. His eyes flicked upward, catching only a shimmer against the glare of the sun. Deck was watching again. Hale felt it as much as saw it. The weight of another hunter's gaze pressing against him. He said nothing to his men. To alert them would only provoke panic, and panic was death in this place. Instead, he let the silence draw out, the tension taut as wire, until the shimmer faded and the ridge was bare once more. They pressed deeper into the ruins, descending narrow steps carved from stone that had resisted centuries of storms. Below, in a chamber hidden from the sky, the heat gave way to a chill that raised the hair on the men's necks. The air smelled of iron and ash, as if the memory of fire still lingered here. At the chamber's center rested a structure of black metal, smooth and unbroken, its surface absorbing light instead of reflecting it. Cross stepped closer, hand trembling. This has to be it. The weapon? Or the trap? Hale said sharply, holding him back. He scanned the chamber. No dust on the floor, no sign of time's passage. The structure was preserved, almost waiting. No one touches it until I say. Deck crouched unseen in the shadows above, his mandibles clicking softly. He, too, had heard the legends, had been taught of the relics hidden in the Badlands. They were not weapons meant for humans or even for his kind. They were remnants of a war so ancient its victors had long since faded into myth. To claim such a relic was to claim destiny itself. And yet here stood humans, daring to reach for it as though they had earned the right. Rage stirred in Deck's chest. This was his path to honor, not theirs. The humans began their scans, their devices humming as they attempted to pierce the secrets of the black structure. But the moment their tools touched it, the chamber shuddered. A vibration ran through the walls, low at first, then rising into a roar that made stone dust rain from the ceiling. The soldiers scrambled, forming a protective circle. Hale's eyes darted upward just as a blur of motion dropped from shadows. Deck struck with precision, his blades flashing in arcs of silver. One soldier fell instantly, throat cut before he could shout. The others fired wildly, their bullets sparking against stone, ricocheting into darkness. Cross yelled, pulling Hale behind cover as plasma bolts tore through their ranks. But Hale did not panic. He had expected this. His calm steadied the men even as chaos swallowed the chamber. He barked orders, directing fire not at the predator but at the ceiling supports, collapsing portions of the chamber to limit the creature's movement. Stone crashed down, sealing exits, forcing both hunter and hunted into the same confined space. Deck roared, his voice reverberating through the chamber, shaking the men to their cores. Yet Hale stood his ground, rifle leveled, eyes locked with a shimmering distortion that betrayed Deck's presence. Not prey, Hale said under his breath, too quiet for anyone else to hear. Not anymore. The two hunters closed in, their men and weapons fading into irrelevance as their focus narrowed on each other. Every move was measured, every strike calculated. Hale's gunfire drove Deck back, but never far. Deck's blades cut the air inches from Hale's flesh, but never deep enough to end it. At last, the chamber's tremors ceased and silence fell, broken only by the ragged breaths of survivors. Dust swirled in the air, cloaking everything in a haze. Deck retreated into shadow, vanishing once more, but his departure carried no triumph. Hale had matched him, move for move, instinct for instinct. Cross staggered to Hale's side, eyes wide with disbelief. "Captain, what the hell was that thing?" Hale didn't answer immediately. He stared into the shadows where Deck had disappeared, his jaw set, something that doesn't lose easily. And now it knows we won't either. Far above, on the ridge where the sun still blazed, Deck emerged from the darkness, his body scarred from the clash, but his spirit burning brighter. For the first time since exile, he felt the pulse of a true hunt. The humans were no longer obstacles. They were challengers, rivals, and in the Badlands, only one side would leave with honor. The desert wind howled through the ruins, carrying with it the promise of blood. Night settled over the Badlands with chill that cut sharper than any blade. The squad had taken shelter in a narrow canyon, its jagged walls shielding them from the wind but offering little comfort. Fires burned low, their glow flickering across the men's tired faces. But Captain Marcus Hale refused to let the flames grow too strong. He knew light attracted eyes, and there were more dangers here than the ones they could see. Sergeant Daniel Cross sat opposite him, cleaning his rifle with a restless energy. The young soldier's hands were steady, but his eyes betrayed his turmoil. "We lost 3 men today," he muttered, not looking up. "And we didn't even scratch that thing." Hale's voice was calm but heavy. "We scratched him, enough that he'll remember." "That's not enough, sir." Cross shot back, finally lifting his gaze. "We're bleeding out here, and he's playing with us. Tell me you've got more than waiting for the right kill." The captain studied him for a long moment, weighing his words. "Patience isn't weakness, Cross. It's survival. That thing doesn't just hunt with strength. It hunts with arrogance. And arrogance always cracks if you push hard enough." Cross nodded reluctantly, though frustration lingered in his expression. He respected Hale, but the silence between his orders carried a burden that even loyalty struggled to shoulder. The rest of the men settled in, some feigning sleep, others staring into the fire as if answers lay hidden in the flames. The canyon was quiet, almost oppressively so, until a sound broke through the night. 3 sharp clicks, spaced apart, echoing from the darkness beyond the walls. Every man froze. The clicking came again, closer now, followed by the unmistakable shimmer of movement at the canyon's mouth. Weapons snapped up, fingers tightened on triggers, breaths held. Hale rose slowly to his feet, signaling for silence. The shimmer advanced until it stood just beyond the fire's reach. Then it stopped and the cloak dropped. Deck revealed himself fully for the first time. His towering form glistened with scars, his armor battered yet proud. He stood not as a beast, but as a warrior declaring his presence. In his hand, he held something that silenced even the bravest of Hale's men, a helmet, dented and bloodied. One of their own. Deck dropped the trophy onto ground with deliberate contempt, his mandibles spreading in what could only be a grin. Then, with a guttural growl that vibrated through their bones, he pointed at Hale. Not the squad, not the group. Hale alone. Cross raised his weapon instinctively, but Hale's hand shot up to stop him. The captain's eyes never left Deck. The unspoken challenge was clear. This was no longer a game of survival. This was personal. Deck activated his cloak again, fading into invisibility as though he had never been there. But the echo of his challenge lingered in every man's chest. The squad erupted into argument. Some wanted to flee, to regroup, to call for extraction and abandon the ruins. Others, emboldened by rage, wanted to charge into the dark and finish it. But Hale silenced them with a single command. "Enough," he said firmly. His voice carried the weight of finality. "He wants me. That's what this has been about since the ruins. He doesn't care about you. He cares about the hunt. And if I don't face him, he'll keep bleeding us until none of you make a home." Cross bristled. "Then let us fight with you." Hale shook his head. "If we fight as a pack, we die as a pack. But if I stand alone, I buy us time. Maybe I even end this." The men fell silent, torn between their loyalty to their captain and the crushing reality of his words. Cross clenched his jaw, refusing to accept it. "You're not walking into that alone, sir. Not while I breathe." Hale's eyes softened for just a fraction of a second. "Then breathe carefully, because when the time comes, I'll need you alive more than I need you beside me." The canyon fell quiet again, but the air was heavy with inevitability. Every man knew the hunt had shifted. It was no longer predator against prey. It was hunter against hunter, pride against survival, destiny against affiance. That night, Hale didn't sleep. He sat by the dying fire, staring into darkness where Deck had vanished, every nerve attuned to the silence. Somewhere out there, another pair of eyes watched him, just as sleepless, just as relentless. The desert had become their arena, and only one would leave it with honor intact. As dawn painted the sky in crimson, the squad broke camp and prepared to move. The ruins still called to them, the relic within promising power or annihilation. But the relic was no longer their only concern. Hale led them onward, each step echoing the silent vow he had made in the night. He would face Deck, not for glory, not for revenge, but because in the Badlands, to turn away from the hunt was to admit weakness. And Marcus Hale had spent his life proving he was not weak. High above, perched on a crag of stone, Deck watched the humans march. His mandibles clicked softly in rhythm, not with hunger, but with anticipation. The hunt was reaching its true shape. Soon, the relic would be irrelevant. Soon, it would come down to what he wanted all along. The clash of two hunters, bound by respect and blood. The Badlands held its breath, waiting for collision. The ruins rose from the desert like the bones of fallen titan, their jagged silhouettes casting long shadows in the dawn light. Captain Marcus Hale led his men into the fractured stone corridors, the air heavy with age and secrets. The squad moved cautiously, weapons raised, every sound magnified by the oppressive silence. Hale's senses were sharpened, but beneath his hardened focus, he knew the moment he had been dreading and preparing for was almost upon him. Deck would not let this end in the shadows. Inside the ruins, strange carvings lined the walls, their meanings lost to time, but their menace unmistakable. The relic chamber waited at the heart, a circular vault adorned with blackened glyphs. In its center, the artifact pulsed faintly with an inner glow, alive in a way that unsettled even the most battle-worn soldiers. The squad spread out, forming a perimeter, though every man understood the futility. The relic was bait, and they were already in the jaws of the trap. Hale stood at the threshold, his hand brushing against the stone etched with claw marks. He could feel it. Deck was here. The silence was too perfect, the air too tense. It wasn't a question of it the predator would strike, but when a low click echoed from the shadows, then another. The men snapped their rifles up, scanning the chamber, but Hale raised his hand. He knew those clicks were not for them. They were for him. Deck emerged from the far end of the chamber, shimmering cloak dropping away to reveal his towering frame. Scars crisscrossed his chest, and his eyes glowed with savage determination. He carried no ranged weapons now, only his blades, gleaming with a cruel hunger. He was making his statement clear. This would be fought on equal terms. The squad instinctively aimed, but Hale barked, "Stand down." His voice cut through their fear like a blade. Reluctantly, the rifles lowered, though their fingers trembled with the urge to fire. Cross stepped forward, anger and desperation written across his face. "Sir, you can't." "I can," Hale interrupted. His tone was final, his authority absolute. "This is what he's wanted, and it's what I've been preparing for." He removed his rifle, set it aside, and unstrapped a combat knife from his chest. The weapon felt small compared to Deck's arsenal, but weight meant little against will. Deck tilted his head, clicking in what might have been approval. Then, with a guttural roar, he surged forward. The battle erupted. Steel met alien alloy in a shower of sparks. Hale dodged a sweeping strike, countering with a slash aimed at Deck's abdomen, but the Predator's armor deflected the blow. Deck retaliated with backhand that sent Hale crashing into the stone wall. The squad shouted, but held their ground, knowing their interference would dishonor their captain's stand. Hale staggered up, blood trailing from his lip. His lungs burned, but his eyes locked on Deck's. Every instinct screamed at him to survive, to endure. He launched himself again, using the environment, ducking behind pillars, forcing Deck to strike wide, letting the ruins themselves chip away at his foe's rhythm. Each clash grew more desperate, each breath shorter, but the fire in Hale's chest refused to die. Deck pressed relentlessly, his roars reverberating through the chamber, his strikes carving gouges in the ancient stone. Yet beneath the ferocity, Hale saw it, the glimmer of frustration. Deck had expected a human to break by now. Instead, Hale endured, and with each heartbeat, the Predator's arrogance cracked. Cross clenched his fist from the sidelines, torn apart by helplessness. Every man wanted to intervene, to shield their captain, but something in Hale's defiance held them still. They knew this was bigger than survival. It was about proving that man could stand against monster and not bow. At last, Hale found his opening. Deck lunged, claws slicing downward with lethal precision, but Hale pivoted, using the Predator's momentum against him. With a guttural cry, Hale drove his knife into a gap in the armor beneath Deck's ribs. The blade sank deep, and Deck roared in fury and pain, backhanding Hale with enough force to send him sprawling. The Predator staggered, black blood seeping from a wound, yet he did not fall. Instead, he looked at Hale with something unexpected: respect. His mandibles clicked slowly, rhythmically, as though acknowledging the worthiness of his opponent. Hale rose again, battered but unbroken, knife still in hand. His chest heaved, sweat and blood mingling on his skin, but his eyes were clear. "I'm not prey," he rasped, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. "Not now. Not ever." For a moment, time froze. Dex studied him, the chamber echoing with the silence of two hunters recognizing each other. Then, with deliberate slowness, Dex deactivated his blades. He straightened his full height, towering over Hale, and released a low growl that carried no malice. It was an acknowledgment, an oath spoken without words. He turned, retrieving the relic from its pedestal with one clawed hand. But instead of keeping it, he tossed it at Hale's feet. The artifact clattered on the stone, glowing faintly in the dust. Deck looked back once, mandibles flaring in what might have been a grin, before activating his cloak and vanishing into the ruins. The squad rushed to Hale's side, relief flooding their faces. Cross knelt beside him, gripping his arm tightly. "Sir, you did it." "You face him and lived." Hale's gaze drifted to the relic, then to the place where Deck had disappeared. "No," he said softly, almost himself. "He let me live, and that's the difference." The men fell silent, the weight of those words settling heavily on them. They had not defeated the predator. They had earned his respect. In the Badlands, that was a victory greater than survival. As the squad prepared to leave, carrying the relic in their battered but breathing captain, the desert wind howled through the ruins, carrying with it the memory of the clash. Hale knew the hunt wasn't over. One day, paths would cross again, and when they did, only one would leave the Badlands standing. For now, though, he walked away with his men, scarred but unbroken, his defiance echoing in the silence long after the dust settled. In the heart of the Badlands, humanity had stood tall against its fiercest hunter, and proved it would never kneel.